Exactly.
Scott, you should just mention the Agile different. It's like Scrum. It has sprints or iterations.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing you need to know about the Agile life cycle. It's time boxes of increments of
short increment. Yeah, sure.
Whereas Lean is not. So go ahead.
Yeah. And so we distinguish between project and not project. So we have like the Agile project lifecycle versus the Agile continuous delivery lifecycle. So the Agile continuous delivery lifecycle, you're, and that's probably closer to pure Scrum in a way, but you're delivering maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, and you've got something that's ready to go into production, and you more than likely deliver into production, right? And I've seen data warehousing teams do this, and frankly, that's one of my favorite ways of working is having a 1 week sprint or 1 week iteration where at the every week you deliver new stuff into production for a data warehousing team. Yeah. Although I also do continuous data warehousing.
So do you understand the distinction? So the Agile lifecycle, you might go through 5 or 6 or 8 sprints before you have something, because you need to do end of life testing.
So I think that Agile is not uniform on its language, but there's the word iteration, which is sometimes used. Then you have the word sprint, and then you have the word release. And depending on what you're limited, or I have an interpretive understanding. For me, a sprint is 1 week, 2 weeks. If you want to really piss me off, maybe more than 4 weeks. But I think one of the big challenges with the sprint, I think what a sprint tries to do is something different than what a release intends. And that's why I use both terminologies. For me, a release is I'm delivering something that I can, a prototype or a partial product that I can actually have validated. But I use sprint as a tempo mechanism to make sure that I'm interacting with my team, that we're getting feedback, that we're making forward progress. But it might be 2 or 3 sprints before I have a release. So I separate the two.
Yeah. You built something, you can test it, you can demo it, but you need to do 3 more of these before you have a minimal viable product. And so that's the Agile based on Scrum, deploy after a number of iterations or sprints. The continuous delivery one, what Scott is saying is that at every single sprint boundary, ship.
Oh, wow. Okay. I that slipped me by, because what I thought that you meant with, and I think you partly do, because this is also an element which when I read it, I had to sit back and I took a deep breath and I really had to digest it. But I thought it was brilliant. Like I said, I have originally a product management background, right? And for me, I still remember my college years. I learned the classical Booz Allen Hamilton, the product life cycle, and the names have changed. But back when I'm an old fart, so we had the old question mark, shooting star, cash cow, and then poor dog cycle. Now it has fancier names. But I when I first got formally involved with project management, I realized that project management is actually a part of that bigger picture. That's where the matrix of the matrix organization comes together. Project management is like, I sometimes use the analogy of a space shuttle. The greatest amount of risk and energy that's put into a space shuttle is during launch, right? And then it kind of, throws off the boosters and it kind of evens out as kind of the shooting star phase. And then it gets up in the stratosphere and is going in the right direction. But one of the things that I remember reading in your book was the brilliant concept, and I think Kanban is kind of the door to this. Kanban was originally, correct me if I'm wrong, was not originally a project management approach. It was something that came from production, and like everything in project management, we beg and borrow and steal from everywhere, which is okay, right? But what you kind of went back to the origin, and one of the things that you say in your book, if you are working on a product and you've put together a great team, and you've evolved into a semi-stable process of working, way of working, right? Maybe you'll review it and you'll perfect it as you move forward. Why on earth would you disband a team? Because isn't the end of your project the beginning of the next project? And
it is. And it's not really.
Let me tell you something. That was such a violation of dogmatic project management thinking that has swallowed the hook, line, and sinker this concept. A project must have a beginning and an end. And I'm like, that's an artificial barrier. What's much more relevant is what happens before a project, or just as relevant is what happens before a project and after a project. And if you can't appreciate that and integrate that small segment of a project into the big picture, then you're missing out on the big picture, right?
Yeah, and that's the difference between like product thinking and project thinking.
Yeah.
And I'll throw this hand grenade out, then I'll move on for a while. And
Please do.
So I think the biggest challenges that PMO face right now in practice is the word project.
Yeah.
So if I hear a PMO and it's still calling itself a PMO, that to me is a symptom that they fundamentally don't know what they're doing.
What would you like them to call themselves?
I would rather call them either a value management office or better yet, a value delivery office.
I have a problem with the VDO.
Okay. Why?
It sounds like a venereal disease.
Oh, well, okay, fair enough. Yeah. I don't travel in the same crowd that you do, so I would. But anyways.
No, okay. That's an interesting point.
Yeah, because it's not just about, like, projects are important without a doubt, but it's not just about projects. You have long-running products. You have service teams in your organization.
Often hidden in programs.
Often hidden in programs. Yeah. Well, there's so you can distinguish between projects and programs and products and service teams. So if you want to be effective, so say you're a PMO leader and you actually want to, be successful in your career, and you want to be, you want to have a seat at the big boy table, or the big adult table. It's got to be about more than just projects, and because a lot of the value delivery is in not projects. And this is true. Like, we spin a good story about delivering value, but we actually deliver potential value. So if you look in DA, if you look at the value management life cycle, coming out of delivery is potential value, and we specifically did that. And this is some of the great insights of Al Shalloway. We deliver potential value, and it's not until things are in the hands of our customers or our end users that we're delivering real value. And this is true, like, it's certainly true in the software world, but it's also true in the physical world, right? So if somebody so say you've got a physical construction company and they build office towers. Well, there's no value you're delivering an office tower and you could sell it. So there's some value there, but the real value is in the occupancy of the tower and in the revenue generation, or the rent generation, or whatever, of that ongoing operation of the office. I think
the term that used to be used was where value is not direct. It's called synergistic, was a term that was played with for a while, but I haven't heard that term in a long.
And it's the overall life cycle of what it is that you're doing, right? So and so this is the fundamental mismatch that project management had in the software world, was that software in general are long-running assets and should be treated as such. It should be financed that way. It should be
I love that concept. I think the closing of software, because then you always have that. A lot of companies have this. Well, what about service and maintenance? Some companies make it part of the project, and like classical project managers find that offensive. Where I'm like, yeah, but that's where you make the value.
Really no longer part of the project. So this, I think, is the mismatch, right? So in particularly, if you take a look at, if you consider projects having a start and an end, which is the classical definition, then maybe like for that office tower, there was the construction project, more like a construction program. But anyways, we'll call it a big project, and it ended, right? Because we cut the ribbon on the project manager, the construction project manager, goes away. But the reality is that building might be around for centuries and has to be managed and all good stuff. So the life cycle of the asset that you've created goes beyond. It started earlier than the construction project. It goes beyond the construction project. So you want to look at it the overall picture, right? And so this is why, like, the value management office or value delivery office concept is really far more effective and realistic than the PMO concept. We really need to move beyond it. Like, and don't get me wrong, projects are still important. They're going to be around, but they're not the only game in town.
Yeah,
and it's not like everything is not a project. You can't
get hung up on your own supply. Yeah.
And it's not a project economy.
Were you chomping at the bit to add something?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Because we've got 6 life cycles and we haven't gotten through them yet, but some of them are more oriented to project approaches and some of them are more oriented to product approaches. And
that's good.
So why do we have, and some are better than others. So if some are better than others, why do we have them all? Well, because situation, context, and sometimes organizations frankly just aren't ready for the program.
So maturity, capability.
Yeah. So you've got a place to start. You can start with the Agile, treat it as a project. Maybe the first time you build a mobile app, right? You treat it as a project. You got to start up phase and you do some planning and budgeting and all that stuff. You go through a bunch of sprints because you don't have a minimal viable product. And then you finally do have a viable product and you deploy it. And then, okay, great. Now what are we going to do? Are we going to shut it down? No, there's going to be a next release because you're never going to get all the features
and an X, and an X, and an X.
So what do? Well, maybe we roll out to continuous delivery because we have a viable product out there. And now we'll add a feature and we'll now deliver it every sprint. Like bing, 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 new feature every 2 weeks, right? So they've evolved from one life cycle to another. Then as they start to get their chops together and they say, why are we having 95 retrospectives over a couple of years? Why don't we just improve process every day and not have a special ceremony and waste people's time? And why do we have to batch stuff up for every 2 weeks? Because we're really good technically. If I build a feature today, let's release it today. And tomorrow, if I have another one, I release it tomorrow. Now you just evolved to a lean, maybe a continuous delivery approach. Do we see this? This is based on our history, Mark, is that every time we go into an organization, they start at a low capability and maturity, and they start with basic Scrum or what we call Agile. And as they get better and they improve their technical practices, eventually we get them to a lean continuous delivery. Yep. And they are the most outstanding teams that we see out there, but they don't get there day one. It's a multi-year process.
Yeah. And we see this over and over and over again. So if the teams that are really, like I said earlier, if the teams are really doing Scrum, I would expect them to be no longer doing Scrum 6 months later, right? But you'd have to get the Scrum tickets out of the way to allow that to happen, right? You've got to allow the team to actually improve exactly as Scrum, likes to preach, and allow them to, start shortening the sprints and get to the point. Like, for example, once you get to the point where you're delivering you're doing a continuous delivery Agile and you're delivering once a week, going to delivering daily or multiple times a day is a no-brainer, right? Because you've automated, there'll be one or two more things you need to automate.
You're skating on thin ice now, Scott. I have this ongoing conversation with clients right now. I want to be quite honest with you. Most clients I know, you're lucky if you can get them to commit to a 4-week sprint.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, like,
here's my card.
You need better
influence. But no, it's the system. Let's endorse a system which is based on value flow, on value chain, right? And then screw it and said, hey, whatever, we'll do it. And I know companies who say, no, our sprints are 6 weeks. Hey, I'm getting a heart attack every time. I'm like, you guys haven't understood the principle of a sprint.
Yeah.
You know the problem with talking with you guys is it's really, even as a moderator listening, it's hard for me there's so many kernels out there and so many paths we can go on, but I want to there's one question that keeps popping up and slipping by, but it's a key question, and it's a stupid, but the stupidity of the question makes it brilliant. Let's just I need to clarify this for our audience. Is Disciplined Agile only for IT?
No.
Thank you. Is it more difficult if it's not IT?
I missed that, sorry.
Is it more difficult if you don't have an IT culture?
It's certainly a lot easier if you're an IT. I think you're a little more realistic about the way the world works usually, but certainly no.
The reality is, of the 2,000 practices in the toolkit, there are many that are IT focused, like maybe test-driven development or something like that. But that just means there's ingredients in the pantry you don't use. You have an allergy. You can, but there's always ways of working. There's always ways to improve your ways of working. Every initiative is like a flavor of project management or a flavor of getting work done, right? That's why it's ways of working. That's why we don't call it Disciplined Agile anymore. Well, we do, but I mean, that's just a bit of folklore, if you will. Our first edition, Disciplined Agile Delivery, subsequent books, we didn't call them. The second edition, not called Disciplined Agile. We moved.
Not Disciplined Agile Delivery.
Yeah, and we moved to ways of working as the emphasis.
But you're not doing the classical Agile thing where you just change the vocabulary to confuse everybody, right?
No.
So at Papa John's, as an example, I can talk about them because they are a case study. And they did TA in their marketing. So their marketing campaigns used to take like 6 weeks to plan, and they reduced it down to, I don't know, a week and a half or something. They used a Kanban board. They got little colorful stickies. They do their daily stand-ups. They loved it. And by the way, the byproduct of these ways of working is more joy. That's a big part of my focus these days. Is happier teams
that's a
and more
very
productive.
humanistic principle that you put in there, which I thought was great. I think those are probably some of the hardest things in a process-driven culture to actually live up to. But I think it's good that you. But there's another underlying thing that's a real pet peeve